Hi everyone, welcome back to Be Rich. I have Shastra with me again in this studio, remotely. I'm in Chennai now and he's back in college. Unfortunately, we seem to be missing each other in the same city, in the same zone. So till that happens, we'll be doing this remote recording till we kind of get our stuff together. That being said, we thought we'll talk about the hot topic, which is cooking on everyone's menu, or not on their menu right now, which is
Yeah,
the Great Tomato. The Great Tomato Festivals going on world, all over the country, and it seems to be off everyone's menu, and everyone seems to be avoiding the purchase of tomatoes, and it's causing much grief to our population. So I thought we'd talk to Shastra to see what's happened, why this is happening, and whose fault could it be, and where can we go from here? Come on, Shaswat, give us an outline of the situation.
yeah. So the tomato situation is as follows. It's something which we've seen time and time again in the past, regardless of which regime is in power, doesn't matter. It's happened
Correct.
multiple times, and not just with tomato, but with other agricultural produce. But basically, this is a
Very true.
problem of inflation. So there's one big problem in India, which is that we're unable to, at least with perishable goods like vegetables, we're unable to store it like how we store rice and wheat for a rainy day. Because tomatoes, if you like use it up, either you use it up or it like gets rotten, and it has a shelf life of about 2 weeks or maximum of 2 weeks.
Very
So
true.
perishable goods like tomatoes are in a sort of flux, and what ends up happening is that with climate change coming into the picture and unpredictable rains. So the funny thing in India is there are different regions where tomato is produced. There are some northern regions, and then you have the Kolar belt in towards the south. And what you see now is that because of unpredictable weather, some regions aren't having any rains, and so your produce is basically nothing. And some regions are flooding. So I think the Kola belt has been flooded, because of which sparse harvest in terms of tomatoes. So now the question is, how do we sort of tackle this problem? How do we have, tomatoes were 30 to 40 rupees or 40 to 50 rupees, I'm not sure what, per kilo. And now it's like skyrocketed, where some people are supposedly paying 200 to 250 rupees per kilo of tomatoes. So it's a very painful price rise, and most of our household lists have tomatoes in it. It's a core dish. Not doesn't matter whether you're South Indian or North Indian. All of us use tomatoes, so it's quite a painful event. And before tomatoes, what we saw was that sugar and wheat were the goods which had a huge uptick in price. So that's the situation right now in India, where, and very recently, the last harvest season, what ended up happening was there was an excess of tomatoes, and people were dumping tomatoes. Farmers were dumping tomatoes because just wasn't profitable transporting it to the marketplace and then selling it. It's a loss, so they just decided to dump their produce. And now, one, farmers grew wise, as you will, by reducing their output of tomatoes. They planted less tomato crop, and secondly, you have your unpredictable weather, your flash rains, and all of that. So you basically have maybe 50% or 40% of what your normal produce would be. So this is a classic case of demand and supply. Supply is reduced, demand has remained the same, so the price is skyrocketed. So that's the tomato situation in India. And with other goods like rice and wheat, what the government does is it sort of steps in and says, okay, this is your price control. We'll come in and try to protect the consumer. To some extent, the Punjab government has tried to do this with tomatoes by saying we'll cap it at a certain price, and they've been slowly reducing that price cap. But what farmers are saying is that, when tomatoes last harvest season, when tomatoes were selling for dirt cheap and we couldn't sell it on the market, you guys didn't do anything to protect us. And now, when the prices are high, you're undercutting our prices by subsidizing tomatoes. That's what farmers are saying. Whereas consumers are saying, what the hell? Why is kilo of tomato, which I used to use so much in my cooking, why has it become so expensive? And this is a classic case study of food price inflation in India. And you can clearly see how a deflation and an inflation can occur in a matter of a few months. And this is why you have two different measurements. You have CPI, which is everything inclusive. And then you have something called your core inflation, which subtracts food and oil, because these are considered very volatile goods. So that's exactly what's happening in India, and this is a perfect economic case study for those interested in this.
True. Well said. And you are very succinct in what you put across. And the vegetable which was off the season, of was of the flavor last year was onions. Onions was
Yeah,
going to 100 rupees, 200 rupees. There were a joke saying you can get a bag of onions free for a liter of petrol. You know, you put or it was the other way around. You buy a bag of onions and you get a liter of petrol free. I mean, there are all kinds of memes going around how
yeah,
onions, and before the onions, it was dal. Pulses became suddenly so expensive and became crazy.
yeah,
So, yeah, absolutely right. In India, we do have a problem of managing our supply chain such that we can manage these volatilities in prices. And the people who
yeah,
suffer the most in these kind of fluctuations of prices are the lower middle class and the poor. And majority of Indians fall into that bracket. Yes, we have removed a lot of people out of poverty, but the thing is, they're not removed very far from poverty. If the poverty line is here, they're just hovering right above it.
yeah.
Any form of disturbance, climate disturbance of this sort can push them below poverty again.
And
And
that's what
tomato,
happened during COVID, which was a big
absolutely
distress event. And those who were just above the poverty line crashed back down worse than they were before.
correct. And the problem is it does a lot more damage to the human person. Well, yes, you can look at it in an economic way of numbers, saying, okay, you had a few bad years and now you're recovering and everything is okay, hunky dory, wow, wow. But as a human being, you go through an emotional upheaval. You know, as a family, a young family, you manage to get yourself out of poverty and you're seeing some prospects of life being better for you than your generation previous. Then COVID comes and it destroys you and your family, and it takes a mental toll. And this is
Yeah,
what has led to a mental health crisis within India and world over too. But since we're an Indian channel, we're talking about India, and you can see it in our youth. You can see it in families. The
the,
damage it's done has
yeah,
been immense to mental health in India. The anxiety levels are through the roof. People are very dysfunctional nowadays, and depression is through the roof. And these are very new things to our generation because in our previous generation, our parents' generation, we never spoke about these things. We
yes,
had the British attitude, a stiff upper lip kind of attitude. You don't talk about these things. You just cope with it. You just put it under the carpet and you forget about it. And,
yes,
we don't have time for these things. It's a luxury to sit around and talk about your feelings. That's the way our
yeah,
parents used to talk. Wow, you have feelings, is it? It was like that. But so this is all very new to us. This whole concept of having a psychologist or having a therapist talking, it's all very new. And this kind of price fluctuations you see, the ripple effect of these kind of price fluctuations runs through the market in these lower middle class people and the poor people, and they have no respite because, like
yeah.
you rightly said, as a farmer, you hope that to make a profit you plant these crops, then suddenly there's a bumper yield, and suddenly the price just crashes and you're wiped out. The government doesn't step
And
in. That's where the government should have stepped in. If last year, when the prices cat- cratered, if the
yeah,
government had stepped in and provided a backbone to these farmers would have said, okay, this year we can still invest in tomatoes because at least
yes,
there's some kind of support from the government. There's some kind of something that's going to come through.
yeah. No,
Because
the
the
thing with
government,
yeah,
the thing with, you were saying,
no, the thing with the government is that they support your grains because that's something they can store in silos. They just buy it and then they stock up their reserves. But they're more wary about how they approach perishable goods like vegetables. I mean, more perishable goods like vegetables, which aren't really something which you can store for very long.
But you're
So,
absolutely right. You're absolutely right in that. But technology has evolved. If you see in developed countries in Europe and all that, the way they grow tomatoes, the way they grow, strawberries and other perishables, it's changed. The technology is there. We need to
mhm,
implement that kind of new technology, new growing methods and harvesting methods in India. That government has to take up the initiative. Whatever
yes,
it is, there is new ways of growing these things in a protected environment where
uh, yeah,
to insulate from these climatic changes, because these
and
climatic changes growing forward is only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. It's
true,
not a one-off thing like a cyclone that just hit you and next year we'll all forget about it. These kind of
yeah,
extreme weather patterns have been year on year getting worse. The rain patterns year on year is getting more and more crazy. So if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, we need to think of a solution. These,
Yeah.
solutions of just putting a band-aid on it and price capping it and saying, okay, we worry about it tomorrow. It's not going to work anymore.
And there's another, so there's one ingenious solution which was posed, which is tomato puree. So what consumers have done is they buy tomatoes when it's cheap, and then they convert it into puree, and then they put it in their freezer. So that stays for longer than it would otherwise. But the problem with that is, again, the how the government has structured their tax on this. So the GST on tomato puree, if I'm not wrong, is like some 15%. So
True,
unless you bring it down to, let's say, 10 or even 5%, you aren't going to see an incentive for even producers or consumers to switch to tomato puree as a way of preserving tomatoes, which are a perishable good. And you can, if you switch to puree, you'd be able to save the tomato for at least a few months, I think, if I'm not wrong,
true,
at least a month
true,
minimum. So
true.
that's something which you can look into even without investing in your climate change control and in GMOs and stuff. And moreover,
Abs-
it's quite a tragedy because if you look at it, there are horror stories where people have been haggling. So there's a story where in Pune, a man was haggling with his tomato vendor, and the guy took the weighing scale and hit him right across the face.
True,
And he's been hospitalized, and there's a police case going on. So it's quite horrifying what it has come down to.
true. That is because our government has long not been agile because of the climate conditions the way it is, how it moves so fast and rapidly, climate is changing. Our government needs to be in response more agile. So the way our governance is done, it's very slow and very cumbersome, and it moves at a snail's pace. We can't afford to
Yeah,
have governance like that anymore. We need to break down our governance into smaller units and smaller chunks and give it far more freedom and make it more agile so it can function. That means the authority and the decision making needs to break down further and filter down such that it can move and be agile. And you've seen this in corporates. The reason why Nokia failed, the reason why BlackBerry failed, you see it because you become so lopsided and your management becomes so lopsided. This is the same reason why Japanese companies are not more in the innovation and the cutting edge anymore because the managements have all become old fossils and they're not agile anymore. And they don't allow the youngsters to come inside and make these agile moves and take these risky bets. In our Indian governance, it's the same problem. In both political classes, you have all these old people sitting there and trying to rule. And they come from a time when it was very different.
yeah,
When weather patterns were not like this, where climate change wasn't an issue. For our generation, especially your generation, climate change is in reality. So
yeah,
the power structure has to change. We need a younger generation in politics, in governance, and they should be allowed to make decisions. They should be empowered to move things.
yeah,
Until that happens, you're going to have this repeating year after year. You just take the same story, change the vegetable or change the
yeah,
produce, and that's going to be the story.
yeah,
But I don't know. Maybe it will change. I mean, it eventually does. Because
yeah,
what happens is either we ourselves learn our lessons and we change, avoid the pain. Otherwise, the pain will become so bad, change will be forced upon us.
yeah,
So, which way we decide to go is ours. But either you can take it the hard way or you can take it the soft way. But more through history, we have always seen we prefer doing hard landings
yeah,
because human beings prefer the slap on the face to
yeah,
wake up, have a wake up call. No matter how much we try to do it the easy way and we try to inculcate this kind of education and awareness, and unfortunately, somehow we always tend to forget. Every time we fall, we tell ourselves we're not going to do the same stupid mistake again. We have a car accident, we'll tell ourselves we'll drive better in the future. But lo and behold, a month later, we are again honking and we're frustrated while we're driving. The same pattern repeats. So I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe I'm pessimistic. I don't know. But as an investor, if you're thinking about playing in these kind of volatility, I would strongly advise you to steer clear. It is not the kind of things, price gouging or whatever you want to call it, to make a quick buck. I would strongly not advise you into doing it. It can burn you both ways. So
yeah,
it is sad that some people are taking opportunity on these kind of situations, but
yeah.
we definitely don't encourage those behavior. it's
Yeah.
better to steer clear out of it.
This has been
Anyway,
a purely economic case study. We're not encouraging
correct.
anything. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And you can see how the effects of inflation and deflation can happen in real time in front of your eyes. How you can see it, in your own basket of goods you're
Yeah.
buying on a weekly basis. If you're a household and you're using your app, you can just see the bill you paid last week and what you're paying this week, and the crazy price fluctuations that happen. It's just crazy sometimes. Anyway, I hope you found this talk about tomatoes and the effects of inflation and deflation interesting and informative as always. Please do subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell notification icon so you'll be notified every time we come out with some new content for you guys. Once again, thank you for joining us on B-Ray.
I'm in Tokyo on work on the 5th of August 2023. I have a lot of following in Japan, Tokyo. Those who want to meet me in Tokyo on 5th August, kindly drop me an email on the address given below or contact us on WhatsApp there. My team would get in touch with you and facilitate the meeting. Once again, I thank you for your support for Be Rich. It's a great privilege and honor that so many of you in thousands have subscribed to my channel and have supported me. I have written 2 books in English, The Alchemy of Money and Ordinary Stocks, Extraordinary Profits. These books are published by us and are ready. If you want to procure a copy, send us a message to the WhatsApp number given below and my team would respond to you. If you want an Amazon Kindle copy, you can click the link below. Finally, those who wish to consult with me can send a mail to berichenglish@gmail.com. Once again, I thank you for your support. If you like this video, press the subscribe button of my channel, hit the like button and turn on the bell notification.